For a long time they sat in silence, the war forgotten above them. Two souls from different worlds holding on to a single impossible truth. Then, in a voice so soft it almost disappeared in the air, she said, "Yes." Eli blinked. "Yes?" She looked up at him, smiling through her tears. "Yes, if you still wish to marry me." The world seemed to stop. For a heartbeat there was no war, no fear, no rules. Only her voice, gentle and sure, echoing in the dark. Eli's hand tightened around hers. "You really mean that?" She nodded. "I don't know how or when or what will happen, but I know this, I want to be where you are." He didn't reply. He couldn't. His heart was too full, his throat too tight, so he simply pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. Outside, the night grew still. Inside the ruined tunnel, two hearts beat as one, and for the first time in his life, Eli believed that even the impossible could come true. The next morning came slowly, with faint light filtering through cracks in the tunnel ceiling. The sounds of battle had faded. Only silence remained, heavy, uncertain silence. Eli woke with Arya's head resting gently on his shoulder. For a few seconds he forgot where they were. He just looked at her, the soft rise and fall of her breath, the calmness in her face. But as the reality returned, so did worry. He sat up and listened carefully. No explosions, no sirens, only the hum of distant engines. "I think the fighting stopped," he said softly. Arya opened her eyes. "Do you think it's over?" "I don't know," Eli replied, helping her stand. "But we'll find out." They walked carefully through the tunnels until they reached a damaged stairway that led back to the surface. When they finally emerged, they both froze. The palace was half in ruins, smoke rising from shattered towers, the sky still gray from fire. But there were no enemy ships above. Instead, human and Zalari soldiers were moving side by side, rescuing the wounded and carrying supplies. "The Alliance," Arya whispered in relief. "They came." Eli smiled faintly. "Looks like we made it through." But before they could take another step, a royal guard spotted them. "Princess Arya," he shouted, running toward her. "We thought you were gone." "The Emperor, he's been searching for you." Within hours, the palace medics tended to the injured. Eli's shoulder was treated, though he kept insisting he was fine. When he was finally allowed to rest, Arya entered the room quietly. Her robe was torn, her hair loose, but she still carried the grace of royalty. "My father wishes to see you," she said softly. Eli's heart tightened. "I suppose he found out?" She nodded. "He did," he sighed. "Then I guess this is where it ends." But Arya shook her head. "No, Eli, this is where it begins." They walked together through the broken halls until they reached the throne chamber. The Emperor sat on his seat, his once imposing figure now weary, his robe covered in soot and dust. For the first time, he did not look like a ruler. He looked like a father who had seen too much loss. When his eyes met Arya's, relief and love filled them. "You are safe," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Then he turned to Eli. "And it seems I have you to thank for that, human." Eli bowed deeply. "I only did what anyone would do." The Emperor's gaze softened. "No, you did more. My people saw you lead the wounded through fire. You could have fled, yet you stayed. Why?" Eli hesitated for a moment, then spoke quietly. "Because she was there, and I couldn't leave her." The Emperor's eyes shifted toward his daughter, who stepped closer, standing beside Eli. "Father," she said gently, "he is not just a mechanic. He is my savior. And my heart." A long silence filled the hall. The remaining guards and servants lowered their eyes, unsure what to expect. The Emperor closed his eyes for a moment, then exhaled slowly. "I once thought peace could only come through power," he said. "But perhaps it is through understanding and love that our worlds may truly unite." He looked at Eli again, his voice softer than before. "I cannot stop what already lives in your hearts. If my daughter chooses you, then perhaps the stars themselves have chosen this path." Arya's eyes filled with tears as she bowed deeply before her father. "Thank you," she whispered. Eli stood speechless. He had expected rejection, punishment, maybe even exile. But instead he saw acceptance, fragile, hesitant, but real. That night, when the palace lights were restored and the stars once again shone through the open windows, Eli and Arya stood together on the balcony. The air smelled of rain and renewal. The city below was rebuilding, slowly healing from the wounds of war. Arya leaned against the railing, her golden eyes reflecting the twin moons. "Do humans still wish upon stars?" she asked softly. Eli smiled. "Sometimes. Especially when they hope for something impossible." She took his hand gently. "Then wish again, Eli." He looked up at the night sky, the stars glowing brighter than ever. For once his wish wasn't just a dream. It was standing beside him, holding his hand. In that moment, under the vast galaxy of two worlds, a silent promise was made. A promise of love that had survived war, fear, and fate itself. Days turned into weeks, and the once shattered city of Zilara began to heal. The fires were gone, the skies were clear, and laughter slowly returned to the streets. Where there had once been fear between humans and aliens, now there were handshakes, shared meals, and quiet hope. Eli stayed in the palace as a guest, though to many he was more than that. The people whispered his name, the human who saved the princess. Some called him brave, some called him foolish, but all agreed that he had changed something in their world. One morning, Arya found him in the palace garden, repairing a small hover drone. The golden trees swayed gently, their leaves shining under the twin suns. "You never stop working," she said softly, walking closer. Eli smiled without looking up. "Old habits. Machines are easier than politics." Arya knelt beside him. "And yet, you repaired more than machines, Eli. You repaired trust." He chuckled, setting the drone down. "I just wanted to keep you safe." "You did," she said. "But now, my heart is not safe anymore." Eli looked up, confused. "Why?" "Because it belongs to you," she whispered. He froze, his breath caught between joy and disbelief. "Arya," she smiled, though her eyes glistened. "My father has spoken with the Human Council. There will be an alliance, not through war but through peace, and he wishes to make it known through a ceremony." Eli frowned slightly. "A ceremony?" Her smile deepened. "A union between our worlds." She took a small silver ring from her robe. "He said it would begin with us." For a moment, Eli said nothing. His heart pounded like thunder. He remembered the first time he had seen her. Angry, proud, untouchable. Now she stood before him, not as a princess or alien, but as someone who had chosen him despite the stars. "Despite the rules, Arya," he whispered, his voice trembling. "When I said I wished I could marry you, I never thought it could come true." She reached for his hand and placed the ring in his palm. "Then say it again." He swallowed, his throat tight. "I wish I could marry you." She smiled, tears shining on her cheeks. "Then I say yes." The day of the ceremony arrived beneath a bright violet sky. The palace courtyard was filled with humans and Zalari alike, standing side by side watching history unfold. Music unlike any other filled the air, a mix of human strings and alien harmonics. Eli stood nervously at the center, wearing ceremonial armor polished silver and blue. Across from him, Arya appeared in a flowing dress made from light-reflecting silk, its colors shifting like dawn and dusk. When she walked toward him, the crowd went silent. The Emperor stood nearby, his expression proud but soft, as if the weight of many generations had finally lifted from his shoulders. As Arya reached Eli, she took his hands. Their fingers intertwined, human and alien, flesh and scale, two worlds meeting as one. The priest spoke in both languages, words of unity and peace echoing across the courtyard. "Let this bond remind the stars that love knows no species, no distance, no fear." When it was time, Arya placed her hand on Eli's chest. "You gave me hope when my world was falling apart," she said. "You saw me as more than my crown, more than my bloodline. You saw me." Eli's voice shook as he replied, "You taught me that courage isn't in battle, it's in love. You made me believe the stars could bend for us." As they spoke the final vows, a gentle wind blew through the courtyard, carrying golden petals into the sky. The crowd erupted in cheers, human voices mixing with alien tones, a harmony of two civilizations. Arya looked at Eli with tears of joy. "The stars are watching us." He smiled, whispering, "Let them." They kissed, soft, trembling, full of everything they had endured. The cheers grew louder, echoing across the palace walls, across the rebuilt city, across both worlds. For the first time in history, the universe watched as a human and an alien princess promised their hearts beneath the same sky. And above them, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if even they approved. Eli's throat went dry. She wished to learn more about humans. I only answered her questions. The Emperor's eyes narrowed slightly. And do you think yourself worthy of her company? A princess of Zalarian speaking to a man of another species? Eli took a slow breath. I don't think of worth, Your Majesty. I only think of kindness. And she has shown me more kindness than anyone ever has. A cold silence followed. Then the Emperor stood. Listen well, human. My daughter's duty is to her people, not to her emotions. You are here as a guest of peace. Do not mistake that for permission to step beyond your place. Do you understand? Eli bowed again, his heart heavy. Yes, Your Majesty. When he turned to leave, his eyes met Arya's for a brief second. Her gaze was full of sadness and apology. She wanted to speak, but she couldn't. The rules of her world were stronger than her heart. Later that night, she found him by the quiet edge of the palace gardens. The stars shimmered in the still water, reflecting their faces. I'm sorry, she whispered. My father, he doesn't understand. Eli shook his head softly. He's right, Arya. You're a princess and I'm just a man who fixes machines. Whatever this is, was never supposed to happen. She stepped closer, her golden eyes glowing softly. But it did happen, Eli. And I don't regret it. He looked at her, the pain in his chest almost unbearable. Even if it means trouble for you? She smiled sadly. Even then. The night wind moved through the garden, carrying their words into the stars. For a long time they stood there in silence, the distance between them small but full of fear. At last Arya spoke again. Do humans believe in fate? Eli smiled faintly. We do, but we also believe in fighting against it. Her lips curved into a soft smile. Then perhaps there is hope. Before she left, she placed her hand gently on his chest over his heart. You once said humans fix what is broken, maybe. You can fix this too. And then she was gone, leaving him under the alien moonlight, a human with a heart too full for the universe he lived in. That night, Eli realized something important. Love, no matter how impossible, was not something you could choose to forget. It was something that lived inside you quietly, painfully, beautifully. He looked up at the stars and whispered to the endless sky, even if the whole world stands against me, I won't stop caring for her. And somewhere far above, among the stars of Zalarian, the princess whispered the same vow. Peace had always been fragile in the stars, and now, like thin glass, it began to crack. Weeks after Eli's meeting with the Emperor, dark news arrived from the border sectors. An old enemy of the Zalari, a brutal race known as the Vorak Dominion, had returned. They had once been defeated by both humans and Zalari, but now they came again, stronger, angrier, and burning for revenge. The Alliance warned that the Vorak ships were advancing fast. The Emperor ordered every palace and city to prepare for battle. Suddenly, the calm beauty of Zalarian turned into a world of alarms and fear. Eli worked night and day in the palace hangars, repairing defense drones, energy shields, and power cores. He pushed himself beyond exhaustion. His hands were cut and burned, his uniform stained with oil and dust. He told himself it was just duty, but deep down he knew he was doing it for her. For Arya, the princess had changed too. Gone was the soft-spoken royal who wandered the gardens. Now she stood beside the commanders, her voice steady, her presence strong. She refused to hide behind walls while her people fought. When Eli saw her giving orders to the palace guards, something inside him stirred. Admiration, pride, and fear all at once. He wanted to protect her, even though she seemed braver than anyone he had ever known. Then, one terrible night, the sky burned. The Vorak fleet appeared without warning, their ships dark and sharp like blades of shadow. Energy beams struck the outer defense rings, tearing through shields. Sirens echoed across the capital. The palace trembled under distant explosions. Everyone to the shelters, shouted the guards. Eli grabbed his toolkit and ran toward the main generator chamber. If the palace shields failed, they would all die. On his way, he saw Arya standing in the main hall, surrounded by frightened civilians, children, elders, and servants. She was trying to lead them underground, her calm voice cutting through the chaos. Arya, he called, running to her. She turned, relief flooding her eyes. Eli, you shouldn't be here, it's not safe. He shook his head. Neither is it for you. Come on, we need to move. But before they could take another step, the ground shook violently. A part of the ceiling collapsed, blocking the path to the tunnels. Dust and smoke filled the air. People screamed, Arya coughed, struggling to see. The exit, it's gone. Eli grabbed her hand. There's another way. Follow me. He led her and the survivors through a side corridor, using his memory of the maintenance maps. The walls trembled with every explosion. The air smelled of fire and metal. When another blast hit nearby, a steel beam broke loose and fell toward Arya. Without thinking, Eli threw himself forward, pushing her out of the way. The beam struck his shoulder, pain exploding through his body. Eli! She cried, catching him before he fell. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself up. I'm fine. Just a scratch. She looked at him with tears forming in her golden eyes. You could have died. He gave a weak smile. Better me than you. They finally reached the emergency tunnels and guided the civilians inside. Arya insisted on staying until the last person was safe. Only then did they enter the final passage, sealing the door behind them. The noise above faded into distant thunder. In the silence of the tunnels, their breathing was the only sound. Arya sat beside him, her trembling hands brushing the blood from his arm. Why do you always protect me? She whispered. He looked at her, his face pale but his eyes gentle. Because you're worth everything, Arya. Because I'd rather die than see you hurt. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. The air between them was heavy, filled with emotions neither could hide anymore. Outside, the war raged on. Inside that dark tunnel, a human and an alien princess sat side by side, their hands locked together as if refusing to let go of the only light they had left. And for the first time, Arya realized what her people had never understood. Human strength was not just in machines or weapons. It was in the heart, in the quiet courage to love even when the universe fell apart. The war had turned the once beautiful palace into a place of smoke and silence. Hours passed after the last explosion faded. Eli and Arya sat in the ruins of an old service tunnel, surrounded by cracked stone and flickering lights. The air was cold, filled with dust and the faint smell of burned metal. Eli's arm was bleeding, his sleeve torn where the beam had struck him. Arya tore a piece of her white robe and gently wrapped it around his wound. Her hands trembled as she worked, her eyes full of worry. You should have let me take the hit, she whispered. Eli shook his head weakly. You're the princess. Your people need you, she frowned. And what about you? Don't you think you're needed too? He gave a small smile. I fix things. That's what I'm good at. People like me are replaceable. Her eyes softened. No one who saves others is replaceable. For a moment, they both fell silent. The only sound was the faint rumble of battle somewhere far above. The light from a broken power core painted her silver skin in a soft blue glow. She looked tired, fragile, yet stronger than anyone Eli had ever known. He stared at her, his heart aching with feelings he could no longer hide. Everything about her seemed otherworldly, her eyes, her voice, her courage. And yet in that moment she looked more human than ever. He turned his gaze away, trying to fight the words rising inside him. But they slipped out before he could stop them. I wish I could marry her, he whispered softly, thinking she couldn't hear. But she did. Arya's head turned slowly toward him. What did you say? Eli froze, his face burning. I didn't mean, it was just something I said to myself. Say it again, she said quietly. He hesitated, his heart beating fast. I said I wish I could marry you. The silence that followed was heavier than the rubble around them. Eli looked down, his throat dry. I know it's impossible, he said quickly. You're royalty. You belong to your world. I'm just a human mechanic. It was a foolish thought. But when he finally dared to look up, Arya wasn't angry. She wasn't shocked either. Her golden eyes glistened in the dim light, full of emotion. Do you really mean it? She whispered. Eli nodded slowly. I do. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were someone I could never forget. I tried to stay away. I told myself it wasn't right. But every time you smiled, it felt like the stars themselves got brighter. I can't stop caring about you, Arya. Not even if the whole galaxy says I shouldn't. She didn't move for a long time. Then softly she reached out and placed her hand over his. Her fingers were warm, trembling just slightly. Humans are strange, she said, her voice shaking. You love without fear. You speak even when it hurts, he smiled faintly. Maybe that's what makes us human. Arya's eyes filled with tears. My people don't believe in love like this. They believe in duty and unity and strength. But when I'm with you, I feel something they never taught me, something I can't explain. Eli brushed a strand of her silver hair away from her face. You don't have to explain it. For the first time, she let herself lean into him. Her head rested gently against his shoulder. He could feel her heartbeat through the soft fabric of her robe. Eli never imagined that his life would take him beyond the dusty colonies of humanity. He was just a mechanic, an ordinary man who fixed broken machines and dreamed of quiet skies. But fate had other plans for him. When the Alliance chose him to join a diplomatic mission to the Zilari Empire, everything changed. The Zilari were not like humans. They were tall, silver-skinned beings with eyes that shimmered like molten gold. Their cities were carved from crystal and light, floating on clouds above deep oceans. To most humans, they were a mystery, powerful, graceful, and dangerous. Once, their fleets had fought bitter wars with mankind. Now, after years of loss, both sides had agreed to peace. When Eli's transport landed on the shining world of Zilarion, he could hardly breathe. Everything around him was alive with color and sound. Glowing plants, soft air that hummed with energy, and great towers that touched the heavens. He felt small, almost invisible among the alien diplomats and soldiers walking beside him. And then he saw her. She stood beside her father, the Emperor of Zilarion, dressed in robes of white and gold that glowed faintly in the light of twin suns. Her name was Princess Arya. Her presence was quiet but commanding, her movements fluid like music. Her eyes, deep and golden, seemed to see more than the surface of things. When she looked at someone, it felt like she could see their soul. When her gaze met Eli's, the world seemed to stop. He froze, unable to move or speak. There was no reason for her to notice him. He was just a mechanic, one of hundreds in the Alliance crew. But for that one small moment, her eyes met his, and he felt a strange warmth spread through his chest. It was as if a silent understanding passed between them, one that words could never explain. The moment ended quickly. The Emperor began his speech, welcoming the humans to Zilarion. Diplomats exchanged gifts and promises, and Eli stood quietly at the back, pretending to check his tools while his heart still raced from that single glance. That night, Eli lay awake in his assigned quarters. Outside his window, 2 moons floated above the glowing city, their light spilling across the glass. He thought about her, the alien princess with the golden eyes. He told himself it was foolish. She was royalty and he was no one. Their worlds were different in every way, language, culture, even biology. But still, he could not shake the feeling that something had changed inside him. The next day, he was assigned to the palace maintenance team. His duty was simple: repair human technology that the Zilari wanted to study. It should have been just another job. But every time he walked the palace corridors, his eyes searched for her. Sometimes from far away he saw a flash of white and gold, or heard her soft voice echoing through the halls. Every glimpse made his heart ache a little more. The Zilari guards never smiled at him. To them, he was just a human, a stranger in their sacred home. But Eli didn't care. He worked quietly, fixing what was broken, leaving behind perfect machines. Still, his thoughts kept wandering to her. On the 5th day, fate decided to test him again. He was working near the palace gardens when he heard a voice behind him. Calm, melodic, and unmistakable. You are the human mechanic, yes? He turned, and there she was, Princess Arya, standing only a few steps away. The light from the garden reflected in her golden eyes. Eli felt his breath catch. Yes, Your Highness, he managed to say. She smiled faintly. Do not call me that when we are alone. It feels heavy. He blinked in surprise. Then what should I call you? Arya, she said softly. Just Arya. Eli's heart trembled at the sound of her name on his lips. For the first time since he'd left Earth, he smiled with real warmth. And in that quiet garden, beneath the alien stars, a small spark began to glow, fragile, forbidden, and full of hope. The days that followed were quiet but filled with unspoken feelings. Eli tried to focus on his work, but his mind was no longer steady. Every sound, every footstep in the palace corridors made him turn, half hoping it was her again. Princess Arya often visited the human engineers. She claimed it was to learn more about human technology, but Eli noticed she always came when he was there. Sometimes she stood silently behind him as he worked, asking small questions in her calm voice. Other times she simply watched him in silence, her eyes full of curiosity that felt deeper than words. One afternoon, the palace energy grid failed. Lights flickered, alarms echoed through the halls, and technicians rushed about in panic. Eli was sent to help. He climbed through narrow maintenance shafts and rewired damaged circuits, his hands moving quickly through smoke and sparks. When he emerged, he found Aria waiting by the control room door. "You came here during the alarm?" he asked, surprised. She smiled softly. "I wanted to see if the stories about human courage were true." Eli laughed, wiping dust from his face. "Courage? I just fix broken wires." Aria tilted her head slightly. "You fix what others cannot. That is courage enough." Her words lingered in his heart like a gentle flame. From that day on, something subtle began to change between them. They no longer spoke as princess and mechanic, but as two people from different worlds trying to understand one another. In the evenings, when the twin suns dipped below the silver horizon, Aria would invite Eli to the palace gardens. They would walk between glowing trees and talk about their worlds. She told him about the songs of her people, about ancient battles fought in silence and honor. He told her about the oceans of Earth, about laughter, music, and the way humans held hands to show love. Sometimes, when he spoke of love, Aria's gaze would soften, and she would look away quickly, pretending to admire the flowers. One night, she asked him a question that made his heart tremble. "Do humans ever stop feeling lonely, Eli?" He hesitated before answering. "Only when they find someone who understands them." She nodded slowly, her golden eyes shimmering in the moonlight. "Then perhaps I begin to understand why your kind travels so far. You are always searching for connection." He smiled gently. "Maybe we both are." The stars above seemed to listen to their words. In those quiet moments, it didn't matter that she was a princess or that he was human. The universe itself felt small between them. But beyond those peaceful nights, whispers began to spread. Servants noticed how often the princess walked with the human mechanic. Guards began to exchange suspicious glances. Some called it friendship. Others called it a danger. One morning, when Eli entered the workshop, his supervisor warned him in a low voice. "You should be careful," the man said. "The nobles don't like seeing you near her. They say it's improper." Eli nodded silently, pretending not to care. But deep inside, fear began to grow. He didn't want to bring shame upon her, nor did he want to lose her company. Yet how could he stop something that had already taken root in his heart? That evening, he tried to avoid the gardens, hoping she would not notice his absence. But she found him anyway, standing alone near the maintenance bay, staring up at the stars. "You hide from me," she said quietly. He turned to her, guilt in his eyes. "I thought it would be better." "For you," her expression softened. "And for you?" He looked down. "For me, it's harder. Every time I see you, I forget who I am supposed to be." There was silence between them, heavy, filled with words neither dared to say. Then Aria stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "In my language there is a word, natel. It means beloved friend, someone you cannot forget even across stars." Eli felt his chest tighten. "Natel," he repeated softly, as if tasting the word. She smiled faintly. "Now you know what you are to me?" He wanted to tell her what she was to him, more than a friend, more than a dream, but he couldn't. The words stayed locked inside his heart. That night, as he lay awake, he whispered into the dark, "If only she knew how much I care." He didn't realize that somewhere in her chamber, the alien princess was whispering the same wish. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew stronger. What began as quiet friendship had turned into something deeper, something both beautiful and dangerous. Eli and Aria spent every free moment together, walking under the shining towers, sitting by the glowing rivers, or sharing stories beneath the twin moons. Eli tried to hide his feelings, but love has a way of showing itself. Every time she smiled, his heart would race. Every time she spoke his name, he felt a warmth that words could never describe. Aria, too, felt the change. She found herself waiting for his footsteps in the corridors, for his soft laughter that made her heart feel light. She had grown up surrounded by rules, duty, and silence, but with Eli she could finally breathe. He treated her not as a princess, but as a person, someone who could laugh, question, and dream. But their happiness was not meant to last quietly. One afternoon, while Eli was working in the palace hangar, 2 royal guards entered. Their armor shone like glass and their faces were cold. "The Emperor summons you," one of them said. Eli wiped his hands nervously and followed them through the endless marble halls. When he entered the royal chamber, the air felt heavy. The Emperor sat on a throne made of silver and crystal, his golden eyes sharp and unreadable. Arya stood behind him, her face pale and frightened. The Emperor spoke slowly, his voice calm but full of power. "You are the human named Eli, yes?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Eli replied, bowing his head. "I have been told," the Emperor continued, "that you spend much time with my daughter. That you walk with her, speak with her, laugh with her. Tell me, human, why?"